I got handcuffed on a Tuesday afternoon for asking a question. Not for yelling, not for resisting, not for breaking anything, just for asking a police officer to explain himself. And the wildest part? The officer had no idea I was the person who investigates cases exactly like that. Yeah, that happened. It was one of those ordinary downtown afternoons where nothing feels important. Traffic rolling by in lazy waves, a city bus sighing as it kneeled to the curb. Construction cones set up near a crosswalk because somebody was repaving a stretch of sidewalk that honestly didn't look that bad to begin with. I had just left a meeting blazer still on leather bag over my shoulder, walking toward the intersection like I'd done 100 times before. No rush, no tension, just thinking about whether I had enough time to grab coffee before heading back to the office. Then I heard it. Ma'am stepped back behind the barricade. It wasn't shouted, it didn't need to be. Authority has a tone, you know what I mean? It's that voice that assumes you'll move before you even think about why. I turned and saw Officer Ridley standing a few feet away. Mid-30s, squared shoulders, one hand resting near his belt. There wasn't any emergency tape. No accident. No one being arrested. Just a few construction workers half a block down packing up equipment. I looked at the ground, then at him, then back toward the street. Am I in the way? I asked. You're interfering with an active situation. Active situation. I remember repeating that phrase in my head. There was nothing active except traffic. I kept my voice calm because calm is a skill you learn when you've spent your career inside courtrooms. Interfering with what exactly, officer? That was it. That was the moment the air shifted. His jaw tightened just slightly. Ma'am, I need you to step aside. Now here's something about me. I don't mind complying. I've never had a problem following lawful orders, but I've also spent 2 decades studying what makes an order lawful. So I said evenly, I'm happy to comply. I just need to understand what lawful order you're giving me. A couple people slowed down. Phones started lifting, not dramatically, just that quiet, curious raise, like when someone senses something might unfold. You're being uncooperative, he said. I wasn't. I was standing still, hands visible, voice steady. I'm not refusing, I replied. I'm asking for clarification. See, I grew up in a house where asking why wasn't disrespect. It was responsibility. My mother used to say, if someone can't explain the rule, maybe it isn't a rule. I carried that with me through college, through law school, through every civil rights case I ever worked. And by the time this afternoon rolled around, I was Director of Constitutional Compliance for the state, which basically means if an officer unlawfully detains someone, my office investigates. But on that sidewalk, none of that mattered. I wasn't a title. I wasn't a position. I was just a black woman who hadn't stepped aside quickly enough. This isn't a debate, he said, taking a step closer. Move. I'm not debating, I told him. I'm asking you to articulate the legal basis of your command. You could feel the tension thicken. A guy near the bus stop muttered, she's just standing there. Somebody else whispered, why is this escalating? Because that's what it was, escalation. Once authority feels questioned in public, it sometimes doubles down. And that's exactly what happened. You're interfering with police operations. Turn around. For what I asked. He didn't answer. He grabbed my wrist. I remember the exact pressure of his grip. Firm, practiced, impersonal. Ma'am, you're being detained. My bag slipped off my shoulder and hit the pavement. Papers shifted inside. Phones were up now, openly recording. But the crowd wasn't loud. It was stunned. That quiet kind of disbelief where nobody quite knows how it got this far. I am not resisting, I said, because I knew those words matter. I am complying under protest. The cuffs clicked closed, sharp, final, too tight. As he walked me toward the patrol car, I kept my head up. Not because I wasn't shaken, I was. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I also knew something else in that moment. I knew this was being documented. And documentation changes outcomes. Inside the car, while he stared straight ahead, I replayed everything. His initial command, my question, the absence of any articulable suspicion, the exact phrasing he used. I wasn't panicking, I was building a timeline in my head. At the station, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Keyboards clacked. The routine rhythm of processing never really stops for anyone. What have we got? The desk sergeant asked. Failure to comply, interference. I almost laughed at the irony, but I didn't. Name, the sergeant asked. Alana Brooks. Identification. My hands were uncuffed long enough to retrieve my credentials. I moved slowly, deliberately, because sudden movements get misinterpreted. I set the credential case on the counter. He opened it, paused, looked again, then looked at me. The shift in that room was instant and quiet. Posture straightened, voices lowered. Captain, he called out softly, you need to see this. Captain Ramirez walked in, composed and steady. She took one look at the credential, then at me. Is this current? She asked. Yes. She turned to Officer Ridley. Do you know who this is? He swallowed. No. That's not the issue, she said calmly. The issue is that it shouldn't matter. And that line stayed with me, because she was right. My job title didn't make what happened wrong. It was wrong before anyone knew who I was. I was released immediately. No charges, no booking, just a quiet acknowledgement that something had gone sideways. Before I left, I said one thing. I'll need copies of everything. Body cam footage, dispatch logs, incident report, names of all officers present. You'll have them, she replied. By the next morning, 3 different videos were online. Different angles, same story. A calm woman asking for explanation, an officer escalating, handcuffs closing, millions of views within 24 hours. Comment section split down the middle, some people saying I should have just moved, others asking how standing still became a crime. I didn't go on television, I didn't hold a press conference, I filed paperwork, formal complaint, notice of constitutional violation, recusal from my own office's internal review to avoid conflict of interest, referral to independent oversight. Quiet, methodical, thorough. Internal Affairs reopened Ridley's file. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Complaints that once looked isolated began lining up in pattern. Prior escalations, questionable detentions, language in reports that framed calm questioning as defiance. Patterns don't shout, they accumulate. 6 weeks later, the state filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. Unlawful detention, false arrest, violations of First and Fourth Amendment protections. The city requested mediation almost immediately. The evidence was clear. The videos didn't leave much room for interpretation. A settlement was reached. Undisclosed, but significant enough to mandate external audits, retraining programs, and revisions to policy around lawful orders and crowd control. Officer Ridley was placed on administrative leave. His badge surrendered. His employment terminated shortly after. No dramatic headlines, just documentation doing its job. I went back to work the following Monday, same desk, same stack of files. When someone asked why I hadn't spoken publicly, I said the only thing that felt true. This wasn't about attention, it was about record. But here's the part that keeps me up sometimes. My credentials didn't stop the cuffs, they didn't stop the command, they didn't stop the detention, they only changed what happened afterward. And not everyone has a credential case in their bag. So when people ask, why didn't you just move, I think about that. Maybe compliance would have avoided escalation that day. Maybe. But if no one ever asks for legal basis, if no one ever calmly insists on clarity, what happens to the standard? Does it quietly erode? Authority and legality are not the same thing. Lawful orders require lawful foundation. Detention requires reasonable suspicion. Arrest requires probable cause. Asking a question in public space is protected speech. That's not opinion, that's constitutional structure. What happened to me wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an assertion of power without articulation of law. And the only reason accountability followed was because people recorded, and because the law was applied precisely once the facts were undeniable. So I'll ask you something honestly. If you'd been standing on that sidewalk watching it unfold, what would you have thought? Would you have told me to just move along and keep the peace? Would you have raised your phone? Would you have stepped in? And do you believe rights should depend on who's asking the question? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Agree with me, disagree with me. Tell me if you think pride escalated it or if you think silence would have been worse. And if you've ever experienced something like this, being dismissed, underestimated, or treated as a problem for simply standing your ground, share that too. Because the conversation matters, the record matters, and sometimes the